Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, don't go making Waterworld. Please stick to the dancing with the wolves that you're used to. This is Waterworld. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Waterworld. It doesn't get any bigger than this one, and it's a fitting occasion because it's our 50th episode.
Yay, happy 50th episode to us.
Happy 50th. What is this? Is this paper?
It's waterlogged paper, yeah.
Kim Coates gives it to you.
Soggy paper. Congrats. Thank you to our fans for getting us this far. We always knew we would make it, but it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, good stuff. The schedule is looking good. A lot of fun movies coming up, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We got a big one to talk about today.
We do.
This might end up being a supersized episode just because there's so much to cover.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, you know, I find it hard to put my feelings in words. Last week, I had a nice little poem to quote to help me express myself. I think I'm going to go read some more poetry. I'm going to have to get back to you.
All right.
Life is strange. So how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm preparing for this nor'easter, as they say. We're recording this on the night before the big snowstorm that's supposed to hit the Northeast.
Blast Zone Storm Watch, special report.
Storm watch. The mood is tense. I don't know. They're saying between 3 centimeters and 15 feet of snow, so we'll see.
In that range somewhere.
I'm not too worried. I've got a snowblower. Tomorrow's Saturday. I don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to if I needed to, but I don't have to. Just going to take it as it goes. But to the most important business at hand, the Bengals won again.
Yes.
So now the big one, the AFC Championship game is Sunday, 3 p.m.
Oh, man.
By the time this episode comes out, I'll be either prepping for a Super Bowl appearance from my favorite team for the last 25 years.
That's
or
wild. Yeah.
I'll be very sad and probably drunk. So we'll see.
This is a big weekend. Snow,
Yeah.
playoffs,
Playoffs. Sorry.
conference championship. Well, as usual, we will do a little edit because by the time this episode drops, we will know the outcome. And I hope that you will hear in my deepest, dumbest voice me saying the Bengals are in the Super Bowl.
The Bengals are in the Super Bowl.
I have committed to a Bengals tattoo if they win the Super Bowl. So,
Wow.
And I'll even put it on the Blast Zone Twitter if it happens. You guys wait and see.
Very exciting.
That's another reason for everyone to root for the Bengals. Get to see me get a tattoo.
We got to make that happen.
So before we dive into Waterworld, did you have anything you wanted to talk about this week that you watched? Something cool maybe you wanted to discuss?
I did. I watched something pretty fun. You and I are both fans of Chris Ryan.
Love Chris Ryan.
One of the Ringer's most endearing movie and television podcasters. He keeps talking up this new show, Vigil, and I had to check it out. And it's good. If you're looking for it, it's on Peacock Plus. Hard to say that. Peacock Plus.
Peacock Plus.
And it's called exclusive, but it actually aired on the BBC first before it came to US streaming. It's in some ways very traditional. It's very much in the vein of British police homicide procedurals, if you're into that kind of thing. It's got some strong actors playing the detective characters, including Rose Leslie, who we know from Game of Thrones.
Love Rose Leslie.
She's great. And it's got a fun twist. Like every show like that needs a twist. Why is it going to be so hard for our particular detective chief inspector to crack this case? And this time it's because there's a nuclear submarine involved and there are national security issues. And there's a lot of good, juicy genre stuff in there showing you submarine life in the British Navy. I've only done the pilot so far. It's 1 hour. There's probably 6 or 8 episodes. So one of those nice short British series. So it's a perfect little juicy snack and I'm having fun with it so far.
Nice. Submarine show immediately brought to mind The Terror, season 1, which I was a big fan of. But that was a period piece.
Okay.
And it was more about a group of men isolated at sea and their little submarine. Or I guess it wasn't a submarine, it was a ship. But either way, it brought to mind that show. But now hearing you talk about it, I guess it's a little different than what I expected. I don't know why I thought it would be more of a bottle show where they're all stuck on the submarine. But no, it sounds like they get off the submarine a little bit.
Well, there's a parallel path. The main detective is on the submarine, and then her partner is doing the investigation on land, and they can only send coded messages to each other. It's fun. And the submarine stuff is neat. I didn't know I would enjoy modern nuclear submarine stuff, but it's a lot of fun.
A buddy of mine stayed on a submarine for a few months as part of a training program, and he gave me some stories. It sounds like a very interesting lifestyle. Not for me, but
Yeah. I don't think I could deal with the claustrophobia, but neither can our lead detective inspector.
I did see some criticism of Vigil that the sets are too spacious compared to real submarines, even though they tried to make it look claustrophobic. Like it's not quite as claustrophobic as it actually would be, which fine. You got to film in it. It can't be that small.
I noticed that same thing. There's one part of the ship. I'm like, this is kind of like a big place. Look at all this room to walk around these weird red
Is that
towers.
a full court basketball court? This is crazy. No.
Yeah. How about you? You watch anything good?
So last week got me itching for, I can't think of a word that rhymes with itching that would apply. I was trying to do a thing. But no, the first 40 minutes of Cowboys and Aliens, we kept complimenting how good it was as a Western. And I realized I haven't watched all that many Westerns in my life. You know, I've seen the big ones, Unforgiven and Tombstone, but there's some really good Westerns that have come out recently that I've been meaning to check out and miss. So I actually watched two I want to talk about, and I'll keep it brief because, you know, it's double the content.
Cool.
But I checked out first The Sisters Brothers, which is a movie that had been on my list for a long time, recommended by a few different people, directed by Jacques Audiard.
Okay.
And listen to this cast, all right? First four top billed: John C. Reilly, Joaquin Phoenix, Jake Gyllenhaal, Riz Ahmed. Not to mention, you've got people like Allison Tolman, Carol Kane. It's just Creed Bratton from The Office is in there.
Ah.
It's interesting seeing him, but that may not be as big a selling point as the rest of the cast. But that cast doing a movie that is able to handle multiple tones at once. There's parts of this movie that are very funny. And the comedy doesn't always come from where you expect. You think John C. Reilly might be pulling the comedic weight, but a lot of it comes from Joaquin Phoenix, who plays more of the wild card of the two brothers. Also has just some really dark passages and a lot of violence, and paints a picture of the American West at this time that is pretty bleak at points, but also drives home like a nice sense of camaraderie amongst the cast. I don't want to spoil anything, but it probably doesn't go where you're expecting it to. And the ending is a little different. I saw some people buck against the ending, but I really liked it. I wholeheartedly recommend it. It's a bit sprawling. It has a lot of ambition. And I say that to counter it with the other film I watched, which is a lean, mean, down and dirty Western from 2021 called Old Henry. Have you heard of this movie at all?
No, not until you told me about it.
Tim Blake Nelson, our boy from Watchmen, is the titular Henry. He's basically a homesteader living with his son and near his brother-in-law. His wife is deceased. And he's basically finds a man who's been shot and is unconscious and unresponsive, and takes him back to his house and nurses him to health. Turns out there's some bad dudes on this guy's trail, and there's a lot more to it that I don't want to spoil. But it's really just like a home invasion thriller, like Home Alone set in the Wild West, but there's more to this Henry guy. He's maybe got a past that we become privy to over time. He seems like a meek little farmer for a lot of it, but then you get some glimpses of some other stuff, and it's really cool. Nice short movie, thrilling, small cast. Stephen Dorff plays the big bad.
Okay.
It's good to see him popping up and stuff again and doing well. So definitely check out Old Henry. Two very different movies, like I said. One is very straightforward and a little more sparse, and one has a bit more sprawl to it and maybe loftier goals in its storytelling, but both well executed. And yeah, I think I'm a Western fan now.
That's cool. Well, we'll have to try to rope some more Westerns into the zone, see what we can rustle up.
I had my eye on The Quick and the Dead, because I know that one was a bomb. Also, Wyatt Earp was a bomb, starred none other than our good friend, Mr. Kevin Costner, which is a great segue into today's episode, Waterworld. Ian, what did you know about Waterworld before we sat down to record this episode? Had you seen it in its initial run or maybe later on video?
You know, I wouldn't say I was fully immersed in Waterworld, but I did see it back in the day. I remembered a few things. That's too long ago to remember whether I actually got out to the theater or that I rented this on VHS, but I remembered the mariner's gills. I remembered when he used himself as bait to catch a big fish. I remembered the going down to the Sunken City part, which is probably the most interesting part of the film. And then after that, I remembered the stunt show. I mentioned this last week. The Universal Studios Waterworld stunt show made a bigger impression on me maybe than this movie. I remember the seaplane coming over the wall, landing in that lagoon, big climactic moment of the stunt show, and just the heat on my face when the big flames go off. You know, when you watch those kind of shows and they detonate their pyrotechnics and you just feel that blast of heat. Those always frighten me. And it still does thinking about it now. But now I gave more time to this show than the movie. We'll probably have to circle back around to the movie here. But for a movie that flopped, it occupies a large piece of the cultural landscape.
I think it's kind of our generation's Heaven's Gate, because there was such a fervor around the production of the movie and kind of the troubles it was facing. It almost became impossible to separate the movie from the controversy surrounding it. I think that's why the movie's kind of gotten a little bit of a reevaluation, as we're far enough removed from all the negative press around the production of it and around Costner himself to just watch it as a movie and kind of judge it on its merits. And I'm not saying it's an unmitigated success on those terms either, but it's definitely a different experience than watching it with all that baggage attached to it. I know for a fact I didn't see this in theaters. I'm sure I watched it, like parts of it on a VHS tape at somebody's house at one point. But most of what I remembered from this movie was from I Love the 90s. Do you remember those shows?
Yeah, like the VH1 little clip
Yeah, they would
joke
have
shows.
the comedians come on
Yeah,
and do
those are
talking
funny.
head stuff about. They were. I always enjoyed watching those, and I discovered some good comedians from it. But I remember Waterworld on the 1995 episode was like probably 20 minutes of the episode. They covered it in depth.
Oh, cool.
And they had lots of clips from the movie, and they discussed certain plot points. So most of what I really knew about the movie was from that episode of I Love the 90s. And
It's a great starting point.
yeah, so I went back and revisited it this week, and some of it I remembered, and I remember that because of I Love the 90s. Like they were very focused on his mutations on the show.
Okay.
His gills and webbed feet and such, and swimming like a dolphin in the goofiest way possible.
Yeah, that was weird. The gills are something that, like I said, those are one of the things that stuck with me. And then when I rewatched it, I'm like, they're pretty small. Like I thought they were going to make a bigger splash on the screen. And they're like, oh, it's
Are
just
you
kind of
using all these words like splash and immersed?
some of them I am, but the splash came out spontaneously.
Yeah, the fuck do they add to the movie in the grand scheme of things? They're not that big a deal.
It was like, what's the cheapest way we can put gills on him and he doesn't have to spend 8 hours in the makeup chair?
And most days he doesn't have to spend any time in the makeup chair.
Yes,
because
it's
you don't
him.
see them in 95% of the
It's
movie. There's a couple shots where they focus on them, and that's probably the only time he had to worry about it.
But I feel like if you had those gills, you'd be short of breath the whole time underwater. Like you need to pump some serious water, especially if you're swimming like a maniac like he is. They didn't sort of line up with who he was.
They felt like a remnant of another draft, and he's a mutant. He's part fish. And then they're like, okay. And then they just dropped all the other stuff that came along with that and just kept the gills and the webbed feet. And, Dennis Hopper has a few lines about he's a freak. He's a mutant. But it doesn't really seem to be a driving force of the plot. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Do you want me to talk about the making of this movie? Because it sure is something.
Yeah, a movie this big, it couldn't have been made entirely in secret with no one talking about it. So let's hear how this thing happened.
Well, guess what, Ian? You're wrong. Nobody even knew this movie was being made, and It was released very quietly. Now, let's get to it. Okay. In 1986, during a conversation with film producer Brad Cravoy, Peter Ratter had an idea. We should rip off Mad Max, but set it in a post-apocalyptic world where the sea level has risen 20,000 feet and dry land is all but non-existent. He would write his first draft that same year, but shelve it after negative feedback, revisiting it in 1989. While Ratter worked on the script, Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner, heretofore known as the Kevins, were forming a filmmaking alliance that would prove fruitful. Costner had a role in Reynolds' debut feature Fandango, and Reynolds would help Costner on Costner's debut directorial effort Dances with Wolves, working as a set advisor and uncredited second unit director. The Kevins would team up again for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, though there were multiple reports of them clashing throughout that production, and Costner was then a producer on Reynolds' 1994 film Rapa Nui. The Kevins became involved with Waterworld around 1992, and despite the studio originally wanting either Robert Zemeckis or Lawrence Kasdan in the director's chair, they were given a $100 million budget for the effects-driven epic.
And immediately the production was underwater.
The script was being reworked by David Toohey and a small army of uncredited script doctors, with some reporting that up to 36 people had touched the script by the time it was completed. The Kevins ignored Steven Spielberg's warning not to film on open water, and in June of 1994 they set off for Hawaii to film in a huge artificial seawater enclosure in the Pacific. The production was smooth, everybody got along, and the movie was a massive hit. Just kidding. The production was famously troubled, with a hurricane destroying the main set and requiring it to be rebuilt at an expense of several $1 million. Costner and Reynolds clashing throughout filming as Costner tried to exert more and more control, and the long hours and unpredictable conditions making everybody generally irritable.
The entire crew had a case of athlete's webbed foot.
Costner was in full movie star mode, with some reporting that he asked the film's special effects team to digitally alter his hairline to hide the fact that it was receding, though this was disputed by Costner, and adding and removing scenes to the script as he saw fit. By this point, the budget was north of $135 million, and the planned 96-day shoot was a fantasy. Reporters were getting wind of the movie's troubles, and they descended on the story with fervor. The movie was being skewered by the press before a trailer was even ready, with some dubbing it Fish Tar and Kevin's Gate, in reference to other famous Hollywood disasters.
Telling the truth can be dangerous business.
By the time filming was completed, Waterworld cost $175 million and shot for 157 days, making it the most expensive movie ever made at the time.
Until James Cameron said, "Hold my beer," like one of your French girls.
Post-production would be similarly difficult, as Kevin Reynolds walked off the movie before editing was completed due to continued tensions between himself and Costner. He was quoted as saying, "Kevin Costner should only star in movies he directs. That way he can work with his favorite actor and favorite director." When it was released on July 28, 1995, critics would give the film mixed reviews, as it currently sits at 48% on Rotten Rotten Tomatoes, and despite being one of the highest grossing movies of the year, Waterworld would not turn a profit until many years later, after home video sales and TV licensing deals finally pushed it into the black. The movie has received something of a critical reevaluation recently, and there are even plans to continue the story with a TV show, which is being developed by 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg and Universal Content Productions. Those are the USA TV, sci-fi TV guys.
Oh, okay.
So likely end up on one of those two. Yeah, every fucking interview you read with somebody from Waterworld is like, oh, you know, it actually ended up being profitable eventually. Like, I give a fuck. You know, like, we're not talking about was it successful 10 years after the fact. The movie lost money theatrically. That's all we care about.
Yeah, it didn't do its job. And we saw it with Ishtar when the movie media gets its teeth on a story that like, oh, things are going wrong. Things are going over budget. I don't know. Do you think it really affects the movie? I'm trying to think if there's movies where I heard that story in real time and it affected my decision to go see it.
The one that comes to mind is New Mutants, but I feel like the issue with that was more it kept getting pushed back. I feel like that damages a movie's profitability more.
That's, I guess, visible.
More than stories, especially at the time. Like, these were stories popping up on the very early internet. And then they were also popping up in like trade magazines, which most blockbuster moviegoers don't give a shit about.
Exactly. That's what I feel like. Some of the narrative that gets formed around the movies is self-reinforcing, right? The movie writers write that, and then the movie comes out and they go, oh, well, it must have been because we told you it was going badly that you didn't see it. And
if the movie stuck to its budget, it would have made a profit. I think the movie going over budget and over schedule is what really damned it, because this movie made $265 million theatrically by the end of the day. That's a respectable sum of money for a movie in 1995.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like nobody went and saw it. It just gave itself an impossible mountain to climb.
You know, the hubris of it is a compelling story. It makes you interested in it, and you go, oh, they were warned not to shoot on the open ocean and they did it anyway. And
did Kevin Costner spend millions of dollars digitally altering his hairline? Yeah, he fervently denies that. But
and
it's a fun story.
Yeah, it's a fun story. But when watching the movie and having heard that story, I'm like, I don't see it. Like,
no.
he wasted the money because it doesn't show up on screen. His hair, you can see right through to his scalp in every scene. And it's not a great hair look.
No, Kevin Costner's never had the best hair post Fandango, if you see a clip from that. And I can say this as a follically challenged man myself. Mm-hmm. But Kevin Costner's in his late 60s now. He's still hanging on, man. He's still got his hair. Yeah, he's got like a little bit of a, what do they call it? A widow's peak?
I know what you mean.
My point being, he never lost his hair. And maybe he had hair plugs or transplant surgery done or something, but he still got it. He's on Yellowstone every week.
He's fine. It was just the haircut. This is a fantastical sci-fi, half man, half evolved uber creature, and make him look like an aging Grateful Dead fan. That's what we want this character to come across on screen. And it was
he's got the build of one too.
Yeah.
And you put him in these scenes with Gerard Murphy as Nord, who just has the Triple H WWF hair, just flowing golden locks. He looks like he's half lion.
I think that's where the CGI went. That hair looked fake to me. That was too much hair.
I think it was a wig. It had to be a wig. That was too much hair. Yeah, it was too thick.
There was
like
one scene where I think I could see under the front edge of his hair, but it could have been my streaming bandwidth going down, just created a little wrinkle in the screen.
Well, that's a little shot at me because you're streaming this movie off my Plex.
My movie provider has been a little bit uneven lately, but I don't complain for what I pay.
Listen, we're on opposite coasts, all right? It's a miracle it works at all.
It is.
Again, if they spent millions of dollars altering his hair, they should get their money back. I know CGI was in its infancy back then, but come on.
Yeah. The giant fish looks better than his hair. So that's, at least they spent that budget in the right place.
The giant fish didn't look great.
No. And it's also on screen for a fraction of a second, unlike
why do it?
Hair.
What does it add? I don't know. Whatever. Ian, should we get into the story of this movie?
We probably should.
Not the story of how it was made, but the story of the movie itself.
We probably ought to, because we're going to be here all night. This movie is long. Yeah, we have a lot of thoughts about it.
We do. Our synopsis goes like halfway through page 3 before we even get to the middle section of the movie. So yeah, let's go for it.
And my throat's already starting to dry up. I better take a big sip of warm pee before we start so I can be fully hydrated.
You're supposed to filter it, Ian.
Oh, my filter broke and I couldn't get any resin from the traders. Okay. You know how it is out on the open ocean.
I sure do.
So here's the movie. It is the far future. Hundreds of years back, global warming melted the Earth's ice caps and the seas rose tens of thousands of feet and covered every bit of land. A man with no name, who we'll call the Mariner, played by Kevin Costner, sails the seas alone on his giant catamaran. One day, the mariner stops to trade at an atoll, a man-made fortress that houses a village of families. The villagers discover that he's not quite human, but in fact, an evolved man with gills, and they sentence him to die for being different and scary. But before they can carry out his execution, the atoll is attacked by a gang of jet ski riding thugs called the Smokers. The mariner escapes with the help of a woman named Helen, played by Jeanne Tripplehorn, and a little girl named Enola, played by Tina Majorino, who has a mysterious tattoo on her back, a tattoo of symbols which may point the way to the mythical dry land. The mariner fights his way past the Smokers and their leader Deacon, played by Dennis Hopper, who loses an eye in the battle.
Oh, man. All right. I guess we should start at the beginning, which is the Universal Studios logo. This is a pretty cool little thing they did here. They covered the earth in water.
You go, what's going on? This is the famous Universal globe. And wait, we're zooming in. And wait, where are the continents going? They're disappearing until there's nothing but water. It's cool.
There should have been one little speck of dry land because we know there's at least a little bit.
Well,
it's not a myth. We've seen it.
They had to keep it a mystery. But then I accepted the premise of this movie for a little while at least, 12 hours maybe, before I'm like, wait a minute, that's a lot of sea level rise. Is that really what's happening in global warming? And I Googled it and very quickly found out that the experts say that should the polar ice caps entirely melt, sea level would rise somewhere around 200 feet, 215 feet, 240 feet. You hear some different numbers.
Right. Rough estimates.
Movie has the water rising over 20,000 feet. That's a lot more. Mount Everest is like 29,000 feet for reference. I looked that up too because I'm like, wait, how tall are these mountains? How much water would that have to be? So at some point,
maybe that's where they are at the end. Everest has become subtropical.
No, you're not joking, man. In the extended cut, there is a sign. I mean, I don't want to jump right to the end and spoil this movie, but the very last thing you see is the ladies standing on the hilltop and the little old rusted sign behind them that says, here, Sir Edmund Hillary and what's his name? The Sherpa.
Oh, no shit.
First summited Mount Everest. So it's literally supposed to be Mount Everest.
I guess that makes sense. But then they would have had to climb 9,000 feet to get to the top of it anyway. So that still seems like a lot for a bunch of people that have never been on land in their life before, except maybe the little girl.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes in this if you start looking at the details of it, which we unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to do. We're going to step through this.
Let's say it's our job, but we don't get paid for it. So it's our hobby.
It's our hobby.
Which sounds like a weird thing, but I like that the movie literally starts with a guy doing a trailer voice going, the future.
That
is totally, this is such a 90s thing.
That's the genuine 90s trailer guy. I think that's the one that all the comics would make fun of.
In a World.
I think that's the original In a World guy. I'm not sure. I didn't research it, but it sounds like the guy to me.
Did you ever watch the movie In a World about trailer voiceover artists?
I think I did.
With Lake Bell. It was really good.
A while back. Yeah, that's cool.
Fun little movie. So our first, after the future voiceover, we get a nice glimpse of the mariner just draining the main vein. He's taking a piss right into a cup.
Yeah, into a funnel thing. He's got a little setup there.
Well, doesn't he? He just pees into the cup and then pours it into the funnel thing. He's got like a Rube Goldberg machine.
Does he? Okay.
His boat is essentially just a big Rube Goldberg machine. Everything is on little levers and pulleys. And,
a lot of shit up.
You hit this lever and then this thing pops up, but then this other thing also pops up. It's booby trapped in places. It's very impressive. I did like his little boat.
But yeah, one of his main things has got to be the pee machine, because you're doing that all day, every day when you're out on the ocean and you have no fresh water. It's kind of rickety for how much of a mainstay of his life that would be if this were real.
So he filters his pee and drinks it. That's a funny way to open a serious, action epic movie, right? Maybe the internet has ruined it with all the Bear Grylls memes, but drinking your own pee is funny.
It is funny. And the way he does it is funny.
He swishes it around in his mouth, he spits it on his plant.
He drinks it, he does the old he makes a little noise and then he swishes it around to water his plant with it. You wonder constantly throughout this movie, what's going through Costner's mind, because he is the auteur behind this. We'll talk about who the screenwriters were, but he took control. This character.
We don't have time to talk about all of them.
We don't. There's 36. But you have to say whatever the mariner is, it's on Costner. And so part of it is, his character, I don't know. He's a smart guy. I know he's trying to be subversive. I know he's trying to do more than just do a surface level character, right? If this was Arnold or Stallone cast as the hero in this movie, I'm not sure if the pee drinking would have gone off at all, but somehow
it didn't work for me. But, it's interesting you say that, because there are conflicting stories about what tone Costner wanted versus what tone Reynolds wanted.
Okay.
Some stories would have you believe that Reynolds wanted a serious, grave, grim tone throughout the movie, where Costner wanted it to be a little more swashbuckling and a little more fun. And then there are stories that report the literal opposite. So It's kind of hard to get a handle on what parts of the movie are whose vision.
Yeah, it's hard to say who's to blame for what, but the movie does waffle back and forth a lot between these various
Sure
tones.
does.
Sometimes it's grim, and you don't know what's on the Mariner's mind. He's such a character. He literally has no discernible past. He's a tough, strong, silent hero in a certain kind of mold, but he's even further afield than that. He's kind of a child. He's kind of a man-child.
He's a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
He's a piece of shit. We'll get into it more later because you don't really see it at this point in the movie. He's a bad person.
But that to me seems like, oh, you're making bold choices to try to set up a bigger arc for this character from despicable to heroic. But I don't know, it's kind of haphazard because they're jarring when he goes from absolutely awful to cuddly dad teaching the girl to swim within a few scenes.
Well, I'm sure he would decry the fact that he only got 2 hours and 15 minutes to display that arc when he really wanted 3+ hours. But can we stop with the filmmaker had his preferred cut, which was 9 hours long. Like, of course you can tell a coherent story in 3.5 hours. That's not a fucking skill, really.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't make it coherent in 2 hours and 15 minutes, what the fuck are you even doing? You're not adapting Lord of the Rings. This is an original story. And there's plenty of shit they could have cut.
For an action movie, yeah, that's what the job is. You know, a movie is not the length of his life. It's the length of how long people can stand to sit in those seats.
Costner's got real problems with movie length, though. When he's in the driver's seat, Dances with Wolves, it's almost 4 hours.
Oh, wow. I forgot
Wyatt
that.
Earp was 3 hours. Open Range, I think, was 2 hours plus. The man likes a long movie.
It's interesting for a guy who's associated with quite a lot of success in Hollywood, how far off his sensibilities are from.
Oh, The Postman. How could I forget The Postman? It's 3 hours long. Sorry to cut you off, but that's the greatest example of his hubris, in my opinion. Yeah, but he didn't get successful in Hollywood making movies.
No.
He got successful being like a lovable, dope, blue-collar kind of Midwest dude in other people's movies. And then he had big success with Dances with Wolves, and that was probably the worst thing that ever fucking happened to him. It got in his head that he had to make these epics when he's just fine as Ray Kinsella in Field of Dreams or in Tin Cup. That's where I want to see Kevin Costner.
Yeah, it's just the idea that people wanted to see him do this weird character. This character is such a weirdo. Like, you're not a weirdo, Costner. What are you doing here? That's what I'm saying.
You're an everyman. Yeah, he's an everyman. That's his appeal. He's built like an everyman too, but I guess, we don't even need to get into that. He swims like a dolphin, which is super goofy.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that already. I did not like the stuff where they try to make him more fish-like. All didn't work for me. The gills, the webbed feet, the dolphin swims.
The dolphin swims border on comical when he sort of kicks himself out of the water and straight up onto the deck of the boat.
Yeah.
It's one of many things that for a character, if you go, okay, we're going the badass route, he's mysterious, he's not even totally human, it gets undercut a lot of times. His fucking pirate pants.
He's not badass. He's not believable. You want to make Mad Max, but he's not Mel Gibson. He lacks that darkness in the soul, which we know was not acting. Now, in hindsight, it's Mel Gibson. But like, Max was a believable badass roaming the wastelands. He'll help you if it benefits him. But Costner, like the way the script is written, he's doing all the right things, maybe even too much of them. He's too much of a bastard. But there's no menace to him. He's not intimidating at all.
No, he's
just a dick
that you wish didn't have power, but he's not going to scare you the way Mel Gibson would have. The other thing that I noticed, even without the story, the physical presence of Mel Gibson on the screen is totally different and would have made this movie work a lot better. But then when I thought back about Mad Max, that character has a history. He suffered. Right. He lost his wife, right? That's the origin story.
And a baby.
Yeah, there's real trauma for that character in his history, whereas this character is intentionally kept a blank slate. He just sails out of nowhere.
And Max had a dog.
Yes.
Which is another kind of humanizing feature that gives him a little bit of depth. He cares for an animal.
Right. This guy's got a lime tree.
Which he abruptly loses all his limes. Yeah. I found the lime thief very charming. Like, I like that guy. I like that actor. I like the character. I thought the whole encounter was cool.
Yeah.
And then when he's just like biting a lime and juggling them, like taunting Matt. I thought that was fucking funny.
That was funny and goofy. He's like, I got your limes. Yeah, shoving them in his face.
It's such a jokey moment, but also like the Mariner's going to die of scurvy now, right? He needs those limes.
Well, yeah, no one else had limes. The Mariner had access to shit that no one else had. Like, how is every other human who we eventually see alive not dead of scurvy? The movie doesn't bother to answer that question.
Well, tomatoes have vitamin C, right?
Oh,
See they have tomato plants on the atoll.
That's true. So, there's little signs of it.
So, yeah, the Mariner's at the atoll. He's wheeling and dealing. Helen asks him for half his chips for the tomato plant and some water. And he just dumps out a random amount of chips. She's like, okay, like, how good is this man at estimates?
He's either really good, he's like one of those card counters who can just spill a bunch of stuff on the table and know exactly how many it was, or it's like a sign of Waterworld. Waterworld is like, say, give me 50 chips, and you just throw some at him, and they go, okay, that was close enough.
Throw 33 chips at their face and just take whatever. So he gets sentenced to death, like you said, for being different and strange. Another unintentional comedy moment, though, is he's so high up in this cage, and they start lowering him so slowly. I'm like, we're going to be here for 20 minutes waiting for him to get lowered. And it reminded me of the steamroller scene from Austin Powers. Do you remember that scene?
I don't, but now I'm going to have to go back and watch it.
Austin Powers is driving a steamroller and there's a security guard like 50 feet away, like, no. And the steamroller is moving very slowly, but he just stands there and eventually gets crushed. It's such a dumb joke, but it's so funny. That was the vibe I got. And then, is that green sludge supposed to be corrosive, or is it just like gross standing water?
I think it's just gross. It's just where they put stuff to decompose and then they use it for fertilizer. That was my guess.
That makes sense. I wasn't clear on it because the way he's like recoiling from the water, though, when it starts getting close to him, I was like, you're not going to drown because your toes are in it.
No, but he's going to eventually breathe it in through his ear gills, and that's not going to be fun.
That's true. That would probably be toxic. You have sepsis or some shit. I did want to talk about Michael Jeter. Old Gregor is giving me real Grandpa Joe vibes. I don't know how you feel about that, but what a weird character.
Yeah, it was. What can you say about him? He gets the job done. He is a fantasy kind of character. He's super friendly. Oh, now we're going to fly the balloon. And he even has a weird, vaguely European accent, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, he is a fantasy character and he has a hot air balloon. So it kind of goes. There's a section of the movie that's a 60s live action Disney film. And he is the star of that section of the movie. And it's about a old man with a hot air balloon.
We're going to keep bringing up the way the tones clash with each other. He seems like he's out of, that was very well put, a live action Disney movie from the mid 20th century. And then I think it would have been funnier if he just drifted away in his balloon and was never seen again. Obviously, you know he's going to reappear at some point, but what if he just never came back?
They faked me out. I thought he was dead. There's a convincing shot where they're trying to get onto the balloon to escape with him. The ladies are. And then you're like, oh, damn, they missed the balloon. That would have been so good. They could have gotten away from these smokers. And then the smoker with the machine gun trains his anti-aircraft gun.
Charles.
Starts blasting away. And only on the second watch did I go back because I was like, I'm sure that guy was dead. How did he come back to life? And they did cut away. They never showed it. It was a nice hidden
ambiguous
fake out. Yeah.
So now we got to talk about where the movie really comes alive or really falls apart, depending on which side of the fence you're standing on.
Uh-huh.
It's the smoker attack. We get our first glimpse. Well, we got a small glimpse of them in the lime thief scene, which they just seemed like random post-apocalyptic bad guys that you'd expect. They get a lot more personality, though, when they come out in force. They show up on dozens of jet skis and smaller boats. There's a fucking plane dragging water skis behind it. There's Chuck, the machine gunner. There's
Crazy Chuck.
Dennis Hopper as the deacon, just having the absolute time of his life making this movie. He loves this movie. If you read interviews with him, he was like, yeah, Waterworld is great.
He had a good time and it shows.
He was probably on set for 20 days and just did not give a fuck.
I wanted to not like him because I'm like, this character is too goofy. The smokers are too goofy, but he's just really good. He's Dennis Hopper.
He's hilarious.
He nails it. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I like this guy, even though the idea of him is stupid as shit. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's fucking moronic, but he ruins the movie because there's no stakes when he's on screen. He's so silly, you know? He's not threatening or scary at all. He's just a hilarious man who smokes a million cigarettes. But that's the problem. Whoever was behind the idea to make this series epic, how do you make this your villain? He's fun as hell, but there's no stakes when he's on screen.
They misunderstood the Road Warrior, or they saw what they saw and they copied as much of it as they could, but they didn't get what made it weird. And so they just kept the sort of lighthearted parts and it doesn't get scary. There's something about George Miller's, maybe it's his Aussie sensibility. We didn't quite understand his references and his tone at the time because those movies, even when they're being funny, they're scary as shit. Like there's something about the way that Road Warrior world pulls off people being crazy that it's always menacingly crazy, even when they're laughing. And that does not happen in this movie. They're just being dumb in this movie.
Well, you do see the outlaws in the Road Warrior commit real atrocities. They're very violent and seemingly their violence is aimless. If they just happen to come upon you, they will kill you. But you brought up the Road Warrior, and I think a way to think about it is they didn't make any character the Lord Humongous. They basically took, his little herald that comes out and was like, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, Lord Humongous. What if we made that guy the main villain?
Yes.
That goofy little dude who gets his fingers chopped off with a boomerang. I watched The Road Warrior last week.
I had forgotten that, but now I can picture the boomerang.
The little herald of Lord Humongous. He's more like the Dennis Hopper character than anybody. Right. He's just a silly guy telling jokes, and we're supposed to buy him as this big threat. And he does kill a few people, you reminded me. But I don't know, it's all cartoon violence. And they smoke so many cigarettes. They're doing straight up comedy routines. So we should set the scene a little bit. They have one ship that has a massive machine gun on it, probably like a 50 caliber machine gun, whatever. And there's a guy named Chuck who is manning the gun. And like when he's shooting this gun, I'm pretty sure he's coming the entire time. The look on his face is just like his tongue's hanging out. His eyes are rolling back in his head when they're open. Sometimes they're closed.
He's the guy with the weird pig mask, right? It's not literally
he's got a pig mask on.
It's like a goggles, but it has a sort of a pig face look to it.
It's got a snout attached to the goggles. Yeah. So he gets turned around by the mariner, and since he's just firing his gun with his eyes closed, starts aiming towards the deacon's ship. And in this moment, when the deacon's about to be shot with large caliber machine gun fire, they're all saying, Chuck, Chuck. He goes, well, maybe he doesn't answer to Chuck. Call him Charles. Like, you're literally doing jokes in the middle of the scene. And then they have to abandon ship, obviously, because he ends up shooting up their whole little boat. That line was supposed to be funny. There's no chance it wasn't.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
a joke.
Absolutely. You know what? It just hit me that the Deacon is Tank Girl.
He kind of is.
The Deacon is a post-apocalyptic character who doesn't give a shit about anything and only wants to make a dumbass joke in the grimmest of moments.
He even says it later, and you find out, he really doesn't care about finding dry land. His people are turning against him, and it's a way to keep them in line.
Yeah, he's trying to keep them busy and occupied.
So he's like, they'll row for a month before they figure out, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. He just wants the games to keep going. He's just having fun. Doesn't want anything to change. But then, from a storytelling perspective, this whole scene is just wild to me, because how much fuel did they burn, and how many bullets did they use, and how much of their, you have to imagine, rapidly depleting resources did they use on this attack? This seems like a large-scale attack for them.
It is all out. It's weird because only later in the film does Deacon go, we need to stop planning other events. Now we're going to go all out and expend all our resources on chasing the girl. So what were they thinking at this point?
This was like a little side mission.
They were just prospecting here. At first, I thought they were there for the people and their resources, but then shooting the shit out of this. If you wanted this atoll for yourself, you would just lay siege and starve them out, and then you'd have all their stuff, and you wouldn't have to blow it all up to ship. But they were kind of after the girl the whole time, so they didn't care about everything. They're shooting and killing everybody, and spending so much gas, so many bullets, way too many bullets. What are you shooting at walls for? Just so I can go inside and get the people.
They also drag a few guys on water skis over ramps they brought with them to go over the walls. And my question is, if you're flying a plane low enough to the ground and also slow enough to drag guys on water skis, why don't you just fly the guys over the wall and have them drop from the plane into the water that's inside the city walls?
I mean, the fans, that's why they did it. They're like, guys, this is a stunt show. We got to give the fans what they came for. Get on the water skis. Seriously, when I saw the water skis in this watch, I was like, holy shit. I didn't realize that was really in the movie. I thought they made that up for the stunt show.
It feels like something they would embellish from the movie. They're like, well, we can't do this, but we can have guys on water skis. Yeah. No, that's real life. That's
in the movie.
I always wanted to see that stunt show, though. I saw the Indiana Jones one. I think it was in Disney, actually, in Florida, but I've never been to the Universal in Hollywood.
One day. Is it still operating?
Oh, yeah. There's 4 of them. The Waterworld Stunt Show is like an institution at this point. It's not going anywhere. It's bigger than Waterworld the movie. Waterworld Alive Sea War Spectacular is still going at Universal Studios Hollywood, Universal Studios Japan, Universal Studios Singapore, and Universal Studios Beijing.
Wow. Is Costner getting royalties?
They must get, right? Because he was a producer and he invested some of his own money in this. So I'm sure he's getting some kind of licensing deal from them.
Good for him. I hope the show broke even. It's weird to think that there are people who are grown adults who may be very familiar with Waterworld, but only from a stunt show, like from their earliest memory.
Yeah.
It's not even a movie to them.
It's barely a movie to us when we watch the movie. So then there's another great joke from the Deacon, though, in this section, when after he loses his eye, he seems upset, but not really. What does he say, Ian? Can you do the Hopper delivery?
I can't, but he turns to the camera, takes off his patch to show his bloody socket and says, we got to keep an eye out for that icky freak. Does he call him an icky freak, or did I mangle the end of that line?
I think that's what he says. Also, the scene where he's getting fitted for his fake eye is hilarious. And again, intentionally hilarious. Like it was written as a comedy scene.
It's more campy humor. It's really weird. they're putting a big wooden eye in his...
It looks grotesque.
Yeah.
There's, yes, like metal stitches coming out of his
It's awful
skin
to look
around
at,
the eye.
yeah.
But then everyone's, oh, how does it look? And everyone's like, oh, it's all right.
Yeah.
Like they're scared to tell him the truth, but...
And then the one kid tells him it looks like shit. And he's like, it looks like shit and it feels like cold shit. What are these lines? There's just so many. He's just joke a minute.
That was probably one of Joss Whedon's
His punch-ups.
punch-ups. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Fucking Joss Whedon. He's got his hands in everything. What was he, 15 when this movie came out? I know he wasn't. He's like
No.
in his 50s now, but still. I was like, I didn't think I had to worry about coming across Joss Whedon in 1995.
No, you would
Lo and
think.
behold, he punched up Speed and this movie. He was fucking busy as a little bee.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't say busy as a little bee. That was a stupid thing to say. And then the Mariner sneaks away in a sailboat, a big ass sailboat with a big ass sail. And he just quietly sails away. Nobody thinks to turn 30 degrees to their left or right to see him.
But I guess the thing is that he's fast as hell. Even though they have jet skis and various kind of aquatic vehicles, none of them are as fast as the giant catamaran customized by the Mariner.
I feel like that would depend on the wind, you know?
Oh,
He gets very lucky with the wind.
He's pretty lucky,
in this
yeah.
movie. The lime thief makes a comment when they see the guys on jet skis. He licks his finger and puts it up in the air, goes, oh, just enough wind to get away. So at least they tried to nod to it there that it's not windy all the time, because nobody's hair seems to be blowing around too wildly. It seems pretty still.
Well, when you tie it back in the weird sort of man bun ponytail thing like the Mariner has, it's not going anywhere.
No, I'm talking about Nord. You know, that guy would have been having a fucking terrible time if it was too windy. He's like, oh, we got to get him. And his face is just covered in thick blonde hair.
He is huffing the Aquanet in the morning the same way that the Fury Road guys would huff the Chrome in a later version of this apocalyptic world.
It's true. Or the earlier version, I guess. The sea levels haven't risen yet.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. They were still dry at that time. Very dry.
Very dry. All right. You want to walk through the second section of the movie?
Yeah. Let's hear what happened next.
All right. So the Mariner is not happy having Helen and especially Enola on his ship. He sees them as dead weight and a drain on his meager resources. Not to mention the fact that the Deacon and the smokers are hot on their trail, hoping to capture the girl and decipher the map to dry land. When a smoker airplane spots them and attacks, the Mariner manages to fend it off, but he's pissed because Helen's confused attempts to help lead to damaging the boat. Later, they meet a lone sailor who wants to trade, so the Mariner sells him Helen's body, against her will, but then he changes his mind. After that, the Mariner shows signs of warming up to the ladies when he teaches Enola how to swim. Then the smokers attack again in a devious ambush, and the Mariner is wounded, but once again our heroes escape. The Mariner gets tired of Helen repeatedly asking about dry land, so he puts her in a diving bell and swims her down to the ocean floor to show her the ruins of a big city, later confirmed to be Denver. Helen is wowed by the realization about human history, but when the two surface, they find the smokers have boarded the catamaran. Helen and the Mariner escape by diving back underwater, but Deacon makes off with Enola. The catamaran is pretty sweet. I was bummed when it was, boarded.
Yeah. It was a special boat.
It's a pretty cool boat.
Somebody in this production was really into sailing, and they spent some effort to build a real catamaran that really sailed. It's like one of those racing yacht kind of things, and you can tell it hauls ass, and they spent some time shooting it on the open water, going fast as hell and reveling in
I think
its glory.
Costner kept it.
Oh, really?
I'm fairly certain he kept it, or he bought it after the movie.
Wow.
I'm not sure if he still has it. He's getting up there. I don't know how much catamaran sailing he's doing. But yeah, I think he got quite attached to it. Spent a lot of time on it, to be sure. So this is when we start to see how much of a little piece of shit the Mariner actually is. He's a real asshole.
Yeah.
He threatens to throw Enola overboard almost immediately after getting on his ship. He's like, all right, you can stay. I'm going to chuck her in the water. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he actually does do it. And she can't swim. I find it hard to believe somebody could go 8 years without learning how to swim in this world.
Yeah, I found that really confusing the first time through. And then the second time, I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be a clue that she was not raised on the water. You know what I mean? Like,
She seems like she's been on the water
but
for
she's,
a while.
yeah, the timing, we'll get to that when we get to the end section too. The timing doesn't work out. But in my mind, now, at least that was what the writers thought they were doing, planting this seed that like, how could you
That makes
be
sense.
from Waterworld? But the thing is, oh, she's actually not from Waterworld. But yeah, you're right. Enola is a cute character. For being an overly precocious 90s action movie child, I found her adorable. Like, I really liked her. And the whole thing is that she annoys the shit out of the Mariner, but we enjoy that because the Mariner's a dick. So we're like, yeah, annoy him, keep going. And she's played by Tina Majorino, who I knew later as Deb in Napoleon Dynamite. What a crazy career. Those are her two tentpole roles, at least the ones that I know about. And she charmed me in that too. Like, I thought Deb was just the cutest thing and like the cutest character in her attitude. I loved her in that movie. So
she's great in Napoleon Dynamite, and she is great in Waterworld too. I had no problem with her. She's another role she's well known for was on Big Love. She actually worked with Jeanne Tripplehorn on that. I don't know if you remember that. about a polygamous family.
I remember the show existing and I never got to see it.
I think I watched a few episodes. It didn't grab me, but maybe I'll revisit it one day. I've got HBO Max. But yeah, she's great in this, and she likes to draw. She's a bit of an artist. She draws the Mariner a picture. He doesn't receive it too warmly, though.
Yeah, he's like, I already made like infinity of those at Scout Camp. Could I say that line again? I already made like infinity of, I can't say it. I still can't say it. I tried twice.
Infinity of those is that's a tough 3 words.
Yeah.
I already made like infinity of those at Scout Camp.
John Hader, poor guy, didn't seem to be able to do a lot else, but he sure was good at saying infinity of those at Scout Camp.
Infinity of those. I feel like I'm okay at it. Maybe it's the name John, spelled Jon. That helps.
You've got the John Jeanne and the Infinity Stones.
So this is our first glimpse into the Mariner's sick world. Some fucked up stuff goes down in this middle section. This is a dark part of the movie. He's trying to get rid of these 2 ladies at every turn. First, you get the weird scene where Helen offers to sleep with him to secure passage for Enola, and he like considers it for a while, but then he's ultimately like, no, you have nothing. What does he say?
You have nothing that I need.
You don't have anything I need?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, super dick.
He's embarrassed because his penis has a gill on it, so he's not sure he wants to show that to anybody yet. It's a big step.
That could explain
Reveal that about yourself. And we'll get into the Kim Coates of it all in a minute, but we should go sequentially through the story, I guess. Also, doesn't he hit Helen with an oar at some point?
Oh, yeah. Because first she tries to take over the ship. She's going to hold him at spear gun point. He's like, how long are you going to keep that up? And then he drops a sail on her. And then he fucking winds up with a big wooden oar and chops it down on her head. Like, you don't see it because she's underneath the sail. But I'm like, he didn't need to take that swing. That was brutal.
He already dropped a sail on her, which is theoretically pretty heavy, enough to knock her down and incapacitate her. She's no longer a threat. So this is purely punitive at this point. He's just saying, like, how dare you pull a harpoon gun on me for trying to drown your little friend? I'm going to hit you in the fucking head with an oar. Jeez.
It's rough. It is a rough move right there.
Rough section of the movie, man. We get more smokers being silly, which, when juxtaposed with like how stark everything happening on the Mariner's catamaran is, seems even stranger. But we get Jack Black piloting a plane. He's the pilot for the smokers. A young Jack Black.
Like, I didn't recognize him. I had to read about that and then go back and recognize him because so geared up. He's got stubble. He's got
covered in soot.
His face is
looking like a fucking chimney sweep.
He's got goggles. So like, you can't see that it's Jack Black. And he has a couple lines like, there they are, and don't hit the girl. So it's not a ton
really using his full talents. Yeah, every story about this. What you didn't know about Waterworld is like, 1, it eventually turned a profit. And it's like, okay, Kevin Costner, we know you're on the internet writing these articles. And 2, did you know it's Jack Black as pilot? And I was like, no, I didn't, because I wasn't paying that close attention.
Because how would you know? Yeah.
How would you know? He looks like fucking Oliver Twist covered in soot. Was Oliver Twist a chimney sweep? Am I making that up? I think all British people are chimney sweeps.
Everybody in a Charles Dickens novel is a chimney sweep at some point.
It's like a rite of passage. And then we get to see the smokers' home base. They live on like a barge. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be the Exxon Valdez.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is at the end.
Because they have a shrine to Captain Joe Hazelwood, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't like the way they played that in the movies. So this scene, you don't see any of that yet. Like, you just see the smokers in a stable, like, warehouse environment. I'm like, wait, I thought there's no land.
They're driving cars. They have
exactly.
It's a big setup.
Big setup. It doesn't seem to be a boat at all, which is totally consistent with what it ends up being, which is a giant oil tanker, rusted out old Exxon Valdez. And I get how they wanted to make that the joke. That was a joke for people in 1995. They weren't worried about it getting stale, as it obviously has. But I don't know, it throws you off in the middle of the movie. Like, where are these guys and why wasn't there an establishing shot of their place?
Simple enough. One helicopter shot of the ship before you cut into them interrogating.
Exactly. It would have made the movie much more sensible, but they were holding on to it for a joke. Like, oh, we've got this great joke. We show the sign on the back at the end and we can't tip that it's the Valdez. Like, okay, would have been better.
It's funny.
Comprehensible.
First, I had to Google who Captain Joe Hazelwood was. And then when I did, I was like, all right, that's a pretty good joke. Also, I had to Google it. So how good could it be?
That's what I'm saying. That was a very topical joke, but doesn't stand the test. Although it's like a slow reveal because you're like, is that a picture of a real guy? Am I supposed to know who that is?
The picture is pristine. They've clearly kept that in tip-top shape where the rest of the ship is rusted and falling apart.
Yeah, do they call him Saint Joe?
They do.
He's in a position of honor.
Also, I know it hasn't happened yet, but they actually get this boat moving with rusted out old oars. I feel like that's not fucking happening, right?
That's not all that plausible. But at that point, I was like, this at least is interesting. We're turning into some kind of ancient Greek legend here. I kind of liked seeing the oars coming out of the ship. But yeah, the scale was off.
Well, also, the reason Helen is named Helen is because they thought an inspiration for the story was the story of Helen of Troy, which doesn't come through in a lot of things. But that kind of ties into what you said about the Greek Odyssey.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I see guys rowing a big boat like that. But yeah, the real thing, the scale was way off. No,
the oars would have had to be the size of, a skyscraper.
Exactly.
So now it's time to talk about the worst little section of the movie. Trading Helen's body for 8 pieces of paper?
Yeah.
For half an hour? To Kim Coates giving an all-time bad performance in a movie. One of the worst performances I've ever seen.
You did not like this.
He's doing a Caribbean accent at times. Other times he's just Kim Coates. He's also playing like a guy who's clearly lost it, which is like a Kim Coates thing. But I always find him as an actor trying really hard to seem like a wild card. And you don't want your wild cardness to feel forced. That's always the vibe I get from him in roles. I felt it in Sons of Anarchy, and that dog shit ass Resident Evil movie he was in, other stuff, I'm sure. But those are the 2 things I know him from best, to be perfectly honest.
This character is way over the top. He is totally lost his mind.
He's totally lost his mind, but he's not too far gone to know, hey, I can sexually enslave somebody because of this paper I have. Like, why does this movie need to go there if you're having like a fun adventure romp? It just has no place here.
This is another case where the tones collide. The Dennis Hopper character has totally made the truly evil bad guys into something light and silly. And then there's this really dark human drama and tragedy going on out on the water where for some reason, the mariner is like, well, we have to trade when you meet people, even if they're crazy. Rules of Waterworld are, you got to trade something. And he's like, I got paper. And all of a sudden, we don't know why the mariner gives a shit about paper or what he's...
It's not established that it's valuable, beforehand.
And he's, okay, no, you can't have the little girl, but you can have the woman for half an hour. And you're like, what? Is this a ruse? Is he really this awful? And it's actually never clear because he immediately reneges on the deal. And then when the guy's like, you can't renege on a deal, he kills him for fighting back. So was that his point
I don't
time?
think it was a ruse. I don't think he was planning to rob the guy. I think he had second thoughts pretty soon after, but that's a damning condemnation of the character to say, oh, he was on board with this plan even for a second, And in my reading of the scene, he was.
No, I think your reading is the more likely one because it doesn't read as he's tricking the guy. It reads as, you know what, you can have the woman. And then like, you know what, you can't have the woman. And then he ends up killing the guy for being mad over this deal, which he engineered.
If he turned to Enola and winked at her after he was like, oh yeah, you can have the woman, then it's like, okay, now you're setting up that he's planning. First of all, fuck this guy. Fuck this Kim Coates character. I don't even remember what his name is.
Right.
But that paints the mariner as shifty and two-timing, but maybe not outwardly evil because he's doing bad things to bad people, which is what you look for in an anti-hero. But no, the way they played it was perfectly straight, and that's why I read it the way I did. You need to have a wink to the audience to let them know when the stakes are this high. Right. It's not like a little thing. He lost me from that point.
It does lose you, and you wonder why it didn't lose Helen. Very shortly after this, the mariner sort of warms up to her, and then like everything's fine.
Yeah.
Like how could she ever trust him? Because there was no explanation for why, except that Waterworld is vicious and everyone knows that's the way it is. But I don't know. They didn't make all these pieces narratively connect. They just threw what if he does this? That's nasty. And what if this happens? There are a lot of what ifs and they don't really make sense all strung together.
I think it's borderline irresponsible of them. If you're going to go down that route, you better make sure you've done the heavy lifting to make it make sense and be narratively necessary, especially when it's our hero perpetrating it.
Right. Yeah, it's not a device you just want to play with and see what happens. It's a fucked up thing. You splashing some dark ink over the rest of the script with that. I don't know what that metaphor was. That just came out of my mouth. It doesn't make sense.
It's all right. I called somebody a busy little bee like 10 minutes ago. So we've been talking for a while. We're not close to done. So we're getting a little delirious.
Because after this, then he rescues her from the situation that he created by killing the guy that he led on.
Right.
And then he's like, yeah, now I like you. And I've been starving you for several days. But now I'm finally going to feed you. And let me show you how fishing works in Waterworld. And then they do this funny mariner fishing, which also doesn't make sense if you look too closely at it, even though it's fun.
Well, it doesn't make sense because the fish are CGI and they look like 1995 dog shit. Not this movie's fault. CGI hadn't come very far. And I do want to say this movie uses practical effects in a very good way. I don't want to just shit on the movie the whole time. A lot of the stunts and big action scenes are done, if there's CGI in them, let's use sparingly to just fill in gaps and add a little flavor, but the stunt work in this film is exquisite, I would say. That's a word I don't use to describe stunt work often.
It's hardcore. And the look of a lot of the things, they decided to film on the ocean and they got real sunsets out of it and they got real vistas. And that stuff is rewarding to see that on the screen. So he gets in the water. He's like, you can't fish with a rod and reel. Don't be stupid. This is Waterworld. And then he puts himself on the end of the line and he's towing himself behind his boat, splashing the water back and forth. And you're like, what's going on? And then they have this sort of shot where the camera's coming up from underneath him. You see him silhouetted and something big jumps out of the water and swallows him whole, I guess, because you barely see that that's what it was intended to have done. And then he kills it. I actually had to read what happened because I didn't understand. He's carrying a little spearfishing gun again in his hand when he gets swallowed. And I guess the story is that he fires it from inside the fish and kills it. And then one frame later, they are grilling fish on the little hibachi.
Grilling these slabs of fish that are just massive.
I enjoyed that. I liked the eating scene. They all had fun with it. All the actors were having a good time eating the fish.
They should have just embraced having a good time in this movie more, and I think it would have worked better. Like you said in your notes in this section, this is when Costner is doing stuff that Costner can do and do well. He's like a little curmudgeonly, but he's coming around. He's warming up. He's not a total piece of shit anymore, even though he is, because we've seen him do terrible things. But this part of the movie is starting to work.
When he teaches Enola to swim, all of a sudden he's in the water with her, and Helen wakes up and she's freaked out because she sees the two of them in the water. And then she's like, wow, he's like a loving dad teaching this young girl to swim, and she's on his back and he's going underwater and she's grinning under the water. And it's so warm and loving. And then you remind yourself, this is just a man-child. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's just entertaining himself with this child whose life he doesn't think is worth shit. This is actually like a dark side. If you follow the narrative too closely, it sours again.
I guess that's a running theme. Yeah. So then we want to talk about the Sunken City scene, because I know this is a section of the movie we both really enjoyed. Pretty striking imagery, some subpar CGI, but that's okay. You really get the vibe they're going for. And they swim below. He puts her in, what would you call it?
I called it a diving bell. Is that the right word for it? It's a weird bubble of air on a long winch.
But they would get the bends, right? Going down that low without any kind of pressurized.
I think you can do it. It's a question of how fast you come back up. Maybe not that deep. It's never explained how deep they really go.
Well, how high is Denver?
The idea that it's Denver, I'm not totally convinced. I saw this online, and then there's an article that's, oh yeah, you can see this one building that's a famous landmark of downtown Denver. I looked at the scene again, and I'm like, I'm not sure you can see that building. There could be a lot of buildings that have like a curvy thing, because they're all, bombed out. They're not bombed out, but they're just not that much left. They're decayed.
In salt water for however many years. So Denver's 5,200 feet above sea level. So they had to dive 14,000 feet.
Okay, they didn't dive 14.
Give or take.
Like, you can't do that.
How many feet's in a mile? They dove about 3 miles. That doesn't seem possible. I guess that's not as outlandish as I thought, though. It's pretty outlandish.
It's pretty outlandish. I guess having it be Denver is a nod to, we're trying to make it realistic. Well, the city's high, so there's not that much water. But then he drops 3 flares and it lights an entire city under 3 miles of water where everything is pitch black.
Just for reference, the Marianas Trench is 36,000 feet deep. Welcome to Ocean Facts with John and Ian. We do altitude and depths.
It's better than Dick Facts or whatever we did last week.
Cock talk.
Oh, that's right. We're moving up.
Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
I don't know.
Both. I don't know. We had some cock talk this week, though, with the gills on the penis. So we're not retiring the segment yet. All right. Yeah. But no, the Sunken City scene works. It's one of the only times I thought the movie's ambitions line up with the execution, to say that they wanted it to feel majestic and grand and enchanting, and they actually achieved it.
And this is your genre payoff. This is a sci-fi movie about a crazy apocalyptic future where most of the residents don't even understand what happened to the world. So this is such a big reveal, and it was done nicely. It looks cool. There's a sense of wonder on Helen's face as she's coming to this unbelievable realization about what the world was. And so it's effective at that. And you're taken away in that sense of wonder. And then they do what I thought was a really nice 1-2 punch in the writing, is that as soon as they come up from that moment, which is so engrossing, the fucking deacon is standing on the deck of the boat and things are worse than they've ever been.
He didn't even bag up any of that dirt, did he?
Oh, you mean the mariner didn't bring up any of it? He's playing in the dirt to show Helen, and he doesn't even put any in his pocket.
Yeah, he picks up a handful of dirt. He didn't bring a little jar with him to jar it up and bring it back. Just seems careless.
More questions about the logic. Yeah, how hard is it for him to go down? Was that something he can only do?
Is it a rare thing?
Once in a while? And if so, shouldn't he have made the most of it? Filled his pockets at least? And if it's easy, why hasn't he built a whole island, right? If he can do that a couple times
he should have his own atoll
a day, he should have just fucking truckloads of dirt.
Should be driving a fucking Roy family yacht from Succession. Anyway, yes, but it is jarring when he gets back up to land, and then we see the Deacon being menacing for the only time in the movie, probably, because you weren't expecting it. And unexpected Dennis Hopper is always a little scary.
The hammer drops. They lose Enola, and they barely get away themselves. But the power of romance saves them.
Power of love. Yes. All right. So do you want to walk us through the third section of the movie? The third and final, I might add.
Here we go. Adrift in the wreckage of their boat, Helen and the mariner are rescued by Gregor, an old friend from the atoll who had escaped in his hot air balloon. Enola is being held on a rusty old oil tanker ship that is the smoker's headquarters. The mariner boards the ship in a one-man commando raid and sets fire to its tank full of crude oil. He rescues Enola from the clutches of Deacon, who dies in a fiery explosion. Back on board the hot air balloon, Gregor figures out Enola's map tattoo, and our heroes fly on together until they finally reach dry land. The others are thrilled, but the mariner quickly decides he's too uncomfortable on land, so he outfits a new boat and sails off again into the endless sea.
Some really good Deacon stuff in this section of the movie. He is trying to bond with Enola to get her to tell him how to reach dry land. He offers her a cigarette. And I almost thought he was being sincere. Like, he thinks this is a nice thing to offer somebody because they're probably valuable, you know? Like, they're not making them anymore. So just trying to bond with her. And he seemed genuinely like disappointed when she said she didn't know how to read the map, but not like mad at her, you know? He's like, any chance you know how to read that map? And she's like, no. And he's like, oh, well.
Yeah. Is this where he goes, oh, that's a setback? Or was that another one of his funny lines?
No, that's what he said.
He's so weird and quirky and funny.
He's being sincere here. Like, he's not even mad at her. He's just like, yeah, it sucks. I kind of love the Deke.
Yeah, it's too bad we couldn't truly enjoy him because he was in such a different movie. And I don't know. If the mariner had been cheeky, and this whole movie was supposed to be cheeky in the first place, and it's weird that they left one half of it cheeky.
Right. And I think I like the cheeky half more. Maybe I would enjoy the cheeky half less, though, if it was all,
if it was all just campy, yeah, might be a little hard to take.
Right. The fact that you're like, oh man, like things are getting serious. And then Dennis Hopper's offering an 8-year-old a cigarette and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. You know, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So
this whole end section with Deacon getting crazier and crazier. And then Enola gets to go off. Like, she is just ranting. She's supposedly has been extra talkative throughout the movie, but she's barely talked compared to how she goes off in this end sequence when she's a prisoner and she's telling them all about how the mariner's coming and he's going to fuck up their shit. And she's great. Basically narrating in this poetic way the mariner's commando raid as he's taking out people on different parts of the ship. She is extolling his virtues, and it's really fun. I really like her in this.
It would have worked better, though, if seen more of the mariner to drive that home, like how scary he really is. We haven't really seen that yet. So she's like, how the fuck do you know how dangerous he is? Like, some kill a fish.
But to me, it was like, he's not that. And she's just talking him up because that's her idea of him, you know?
That's a cute reading of it.
Yeah, to me, it's a disappointment that he actually is a badass commando. I like him better as a mariner, a guy who's really good at sailing his boat, who's sometimes tough enough to survive in some gritty encounters. But they turn him into a 90s action hero and do a full-on commander. They give him boots and goggles and a shotgun and a bandolier. And I'm like, why'd you do that? That was just corny.
The 90s were high time for bandoliers. Bandolier sales were higher than they've ever been in the mid-90s. They've plummeted since. It's sad. No, he was, I liked his confrontation with the Deacon. Just him by himself. Walks up, they have a short little showdown, and that part worked. Him dropping a flare into their crude oil, that worked for me too, because it was like, oh shit, that's kind of a subversion of our expectations. We expect him to hold it there and negotiate, and it's just more to the point, which I really appreciated, because at this point I was very tired.
Yeah, that earned points for me too. Like, thank you. Yeah, you just did it. You didn't fucking do a long, drawn out hostage thing.
Right. The Deacon is literally insane. Like, you're not going to negotiate with this man. The faster we get to the big action scene, the better we'll all be. And you called this out, but I also liked it. That guy who's watching all the oil, like the oil tender?
Yeah. There's an old man on a little boat. He's forced to stay in the dank hole with the oil the whole time and tell him how much is left. And his life is shit. And the Deacon spits in his face every time he sees him. And then he sees the flare come down and he just goes, oh, thank God, because it's all over.
Now, wait, drinking water is precious here. Have we considered this is a Dune situation, like with the Fremen, where the Deacon spitting on this guy is a great honor because you can drink that now if you want, I guess?
Well, I'm glad you asked because, yes, I did consider that. And I looked to see if the old man was going to lap up the spittle off his own face as a gift he had been given, but that did not happen. So I took it as an insult.
Too bad. I was trying to help the Deacon score some points, but there's none to be had. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of action-y stuff happens. We don't need to walk through it beat by beat. There's some cool stuff. The Mariner seems really into like little pulleys and zip lines, and that's how he tends to do battle, is with various wires of sorts.
Yeah, they realize, oh, it's going to be way out of character. If he goes this whole movie doing sailing ship stuff with his pulleys and his lines and his harpoons, and then if he just kills all the bad guys with a shotgun, he kills one of them with the shotgun, and they're like, okay, we're going back to hooks and lines. And at least they recognize that. He brings down the Deacon's escape attempt by finding another cable to snag him with.
Right. And that's fun. That's fine. It's well done. Again, like, really, I don't know if they really did, but it really looks like they were flying a plane on this big oil tanker, which is cool.
Yeah, good stunts there.
Not something you really see much anymore, unless you go to Universal Studios Hollywood or Japan, Beijing, Singapore.
That's right.
But then they get off the tanker, the Valdez. Sorry, it's still funny.
I laughed when I saw that. I did not remember that. And I'm like, oh, God.
Like, it's kind of a shitty joke because that was a true ecological disaster. I don't think you get away with making a Deepwater Horizon joke in a movie today, to that degree. But it wasn't even the fact that it was the Valdez that I found funny. It was like the shrine to Captain Joe that I found funny.
That was weird and funny.
Yeah, it was weird, which is what I was looking for in this movie. The weirder, the better. They make it to dry land, filmed on the big island in Hawaii. Lovely, lovely backdrop. And this whole part of the movie I actually really liked when they're on dry land. It's short. It's probably like 5 minutes of them walking around, looking around, getting their bearings. I actually almost felt a small fraction of what the characters felt, which is like relief to be on land,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's the thing that the movie has going in its premise that it holds over you, that actual tension of humans with nowhere to fucking put your feet down. It's all water. And
that's like a phobia of mine. It's like, weirdly, I don't really like the ocean.
No, the ocean is scary. It just takes a special kind of person to deal with life on the water. So yeah, for us, there is a real palpable sense of relief when these people hit land and there's fresh water and there's rocks and dirt under their feet. So the movie takes advantage of that nicely. I was ready for it to end. I felt a little bit Lord of the Rings-ish to me with layers of endings after endings, but I know what you mean. There was some joy in just finally being able to see solid ground.
And I thought that the fact that the mariner doesn't feel right there and he wants to leave, go back out on the water. It was a nice bittersweet touch to the ending that could have been just a little too feel-goody if it was just like everyone lives together happily forever. Him going back out on the water was a nice touch, but I know you had some qualms with the execution.
Like you said, they knew they had to wrap it up quickly. It's communicated pretty fast in the scene. They get there, they look around, and then she's like, how you doing, Mariner? And he's kneeling down, he picks up some twigs, and he's just fucking horrified. He's like looking at this handful of dirt and twigs. And then some horses run by and he's shitting his pants. He's like, I hate the land. It's awful. I gotta go. I gotta leave. I can't be here. Costner really pulls it off because he looks scared as shit.
I don't think he does. I think he's overacting in that scene, which is what could have been subtler.
But it's funny. But it also reinforces the fact that the mariner is this weirdo. He's this man-child, right? Like he can't handle it. And the little girl has to tell him, fucking buck up, dude. It's land sickness. We all have it. We're getting over it. Stop being a wuss. Deal with the problem. We're all uncomfortable on land. And he's like, yeah, but I got the weird ears with the gills. I can't be here. I'm like, oh,
he seems fine in terms of being able to breathe. It's not like he lives underwater.
Yeah, he wasn't like literally sick. They had shown him trying to get along, and then all of a sudden he's like stumbling and falling over and like, what's wrong with him? He's sick. Like, we've got to get him back out on the water.
Do you really trust Kevin Costner to get that across without making it silly?
I don't know. I liked what he did because of the distaste that I had formed for this complicated and ultimately bad character.
Is he complicated? I think he's just bad. He just sucks.
Just bad in layers.
Asshole.
But yeah, I thought it was hilarious when he was shitting his pants about seeing a horse and a twig. And so I'm like, yeah, get out of here. You don't belong on land.
The happy way to read the ending is he knows where they are. He can go out on the water for a few months and then come back and visit for a few days. And he doesn't have to just never see them again. They're going to be there for a while.
Right. He says he's going to tell other people about it. So it sets up this thing like, oh, he'll visit, but he's our little weirdo. He can't stand the land. So I guess we won't see much of him, but hopefully he'll visit.
I hope he really vets the people he tells about it because
no shit.
Like 9 out of 10 people we meet on the water are fucking horrible.
Right. Who's he going to send back?
The lime thief.
Yeah.
The lime thief's the nicest guy he met.
That's a good point.
I stole all his fucking limes. So that was Waterworld. What a movie.
Man.
It was not the disaster I was expecting. I enjoyed large sections of it, but most of them didn't have to do with Kevin Costner.
No, he's too weird by half.
And I like Kevin Costner as an actor, but this movie did him no favors, and that's of his own doing, I think.
Yeah, but overall, I would say, yeah, the movie is enjoyable. It has a lot of drama that I could get into. The post-apocalyptic mythology is maybe the weakest part of it, but just the drama of these people living on the sea and dealing with the stuff is good. But yeah, it's just kind of too muddled to really hang together.
I think the problem with the post-apocalyptic setting is it's too far out. Not like in terms of, dude, this is wild, man, it's far out. More in the sense of like, the apocalypse happened way too long ago. It doesn't feel post-apocalyptic most of the time, except when you see like the remnants of civilization that the smokers have. It just feels like a sci-fi story in a completely new setting. Whereas in Mad Max, you could still see the world was there and it's clearly deteriorated, but we're not 1,000 years past when everything went wrong.
That's part of my problem with it. We're so far in the future, and yet these people act, especially the smokers, act like the shit just went down. They're still living off of stuff that they stocked up. These guys they're not a society. How do you have hundreds of people living together and yet they don't have jobs and routines? They just like party until it's time to
marauders.
row or it's time to maraud. Yeah. None of it makes sense. And you would think that new societies would spring up and they wouldn't still be wearing pots and pans on their heads that they found. Like they would just recreate Stone Age society and then build their way up to more technology.
Yeah. And I think what they were going for with the smokers is that they're the bad guys because they're holding on to civilization as it was, and that they're using technology and the remnants of what caused the world to go into this state. But they're bad villains because their motivations are so thin.
Yeah.
You know, there's no way to see things from their point of view. You know, there's no depth to them. They're just crazy, insane, literally. And they literally are chanting like kill, kill at one point. And I'm like, that's just too, I don't know. They make the movie fun, but they also undermine it at every turn.
It doesn't hold together. You're right. And just the idea that the rate that they're going through cigarettes and booze on the ship, how did they have 350 years worth of that stuff, right? Or if not, if this was a group that had been recently corrupted by the discovery of this ship that had these remnants of this old civilization on it, and now they got addicted to cigarettes and alcohol, that's kind of an interesting story, right? Like what happens if a bunch of people who had formed a primitive society in the aftermath of the world being reinvented suddenly got exposed to this stuff that corrupted them and turned them into the bad guys? But I just made that up. That's not in the movie at all.
That is not the story the movie was trying to tell. No, you're thinking way too.
Putting something in there that wasn't in there. But like that would have been interesting or something. But you're right. They have nothing. They're just there to shout and fire guns and make a mess.
You want to talk about what happened to the people involved?
Yeah. Did Kevin Costner ever make another movie?
Funny you mention it because we're doing another Costner movie next week.
Oh, shit, he did. We're back.
So Costner followed this up with Tin Cup, which is a nice little golf romance movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's perfectly pleasant. Fine movie. No problem there. It didn't make a lot of money. It didn't double its budget, so it probably lost a little bit. But not a huge disaster that would start making everybody call him, you know, an albatross on movies and question his hubris and if he had any place in Hollywood. That would come next with The Postman. And a lot of what people talk about with this movie, I think maybe they're confusing it for The Postman. Like this movie lost money for sure theatrically, but it didn't lose so much money. And it was not great, but it wasn't terrible. Like it got 48% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's middle of the road. It's mediocre reviews. The Postman, I think, is Costner's real disaster. And I think they happened so close together that 25 years later, we can't tell the difference between the two.
I totally know what you mean. I had the opposite experience. I thought they were like 10 years apart. Just because what are the odds that he would do that again? I still can't even wrap my head around it. I thought that 10 or 12 years later, he came back to the idea that, you know what? I love post-apocalyptic stuff. I'm going to give it another shot. But he gave it another shot like the next year. He must have started making that movie right away when he wrapped this.
Yeah. The Postman is just a great microcosm of actors' hubris because it's rated R, whereas Waterworld is PG-13, so it has more of a chance to connect with a bigger audience. It's 177 minutes long, just under 3 hours. The co-lead is Tom Petty.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if he's the co-lead. He's got a big role in it. It cost $80 million to make. And I know you watched like a little bit of it. You didn't finish it, obviously, because who's got that kind of fucking time? I
watched the first 15 just to get the flavor of it.
You do not see $80 million on screen, in my opinion, in that movie. And it only made $20 million.
Oh, shit.
It's got 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics fucking hated it. Nobody went to see it. We're going to have to cover it eventually. That's not next week's movie. I know we said we're doing another Costner movie next week. It's not that one. We got to save that one for a milestone, or at least a few months after we did Waterworld.
Yeah.
Can't blow our Costner load that quick. But The Postman is his real failure of the 90s, in my opinion. And after that, he scaled back and he did some smaller roles, small movies, supporting roles in big movies, or big roles in small movies is his thing now. And then in 2018, he started starring in Yellowstone, which is somehow like the most popular show on television, even though nobody I know watches it.
It's a mystery show. It's a huge deal. It's put Paramount's on the map as a streaming service, and I don't know who's watching it.
I have no fucking idea who watches this show. It is such a mystery to me. I'm sure it's fine. It doesn't seem bad. It's Tyler Sheridan, who we're both fond of.
Right.
But so that's Costner. Jeanne Tripplehorn, or as I call her, Jeanne Triceratops.
Oh, very fitting to use the official scientific name for her.
Triceratops means 3 horns. My son's obsessed with Triceratops, so I know this. It's his favorite dinosaur.
I was mine as a kid, too. I'm right there with him.
It's a good one. I'm an Ankylosaurus guy.
Oh, yeah.
They're very similar. They occupy the same space.
Sure.
I love Jeanne Tripplehorn. She's just a great actress. I really enjoy seeing her and stuff. She was great in New Girl in a very small role that she did not have to make so interesting as Uli, one of Jess's boyfriend's ex-wives.
Oh, okay.
She's great in it. But she's got the Gilded Age. She's one of the stars of that show that just started on HBO.
Neat.
Yeah, just had its premiere episode this past weekend. I'll probably check it out because it's got Christine Baranski in it. Great job, Baranski. Great cast, period piece. And Jeanne Tripplehorn and Christine Baranski. Twist my arm, why don't you? Definitely be checking that out.
She was so good in this, and I'm just only vaguely familiar with her, but by spending this couple hours with her in this movie, I loved her. She brought a warm heart that obviously Kevin Costner could not bring because his character had no heart. It had gills instead of a heart, but yeah, she was delightful in this.
And as we mentioned, she starred in Big Love. I would say she was the co-lead of Big Love for its entire run, which was 5 years. Wow. 2006, 2011. Tina Majorino, who played Nola, was, as we mentioned, Deb in Napoleon Dynamite, and Cindy Mack Mackenzie in Veronica Mars, which was a very popular show, and then she was a major role on that. She does mostly TV work, but a lot of like season-long arcs or multi-season arcs, so she's not just like popping in and disappearing an episode here or there. She's been on Bones, True Blood, Grey's Anatomy, Legends, Scorpion. She's staying busy, but she's a good actress. And like you said, she was a child actor in an action movie that somehow managed to not be incredibly annoying. So that's a feat in and of itself. I found her quite charming.
Yeah, she was just cool. I don't know. She brought a real cool to those scenes at the end where it gets real corny. She's the only reason that they worked at all, I thought.
You're almost like, why do you want to hang out with this guy? You're way cooler than him.
She was way cooler.
Kevin Reynolds, one half of the Kevins, he would go on to make some non-Kevin Costner movies, if you can believe it.
Oh, really?
I know. Yeah. Interesting. He did 187, which was, I believe, Samuel L. Jackson's first starring role. That was his next movie after this one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was a bomb. I remember liking it, but I was also very young when I saw it. Way too young to be watching that movie, but I liked it. I'm trying to remember the plot off the top of my head. I promise I'm not Googling. I think it was like one of those old Tom Berenger movies from the 80s where he's like a teacher who gets caught up in some kind of gang war. I'm going to have to fact check myself on that one to see if I'm telling the truth, but that's what I remember about that movie.
Guess.
And then he made The Count of Monte Cristo after that, which did okay. You remember that movie. That was a movie people talked about.
Wait, was that Caviezel? Who was Count of Monte Cristo?
Oh, Lord. I hope not. That guy sucks now.
Yeah.
Jim Caviezel, he's a fucking asshole. Was he yeah, he was the Count of Monte Cristo. You're right.
Shit.
Look at you. That's a good pull.
That's from my very meager movie knowledge. I pulled Jim Caviezel out of my ass. Now I'm putting him back.
Who's the other guy? Guy Pearce.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. I love that between Guy Pearce and Jim Caviezel. You're like, that's a Caviezel flick. But he's the guy in it, you know. All right, I'm going to look up 187 real quick just to see if I got it. 187, as you may know, is police code for murder.
Yes.
Yep, it's one of those. Oh, I love those movies. Like teacher gets caught up, violent gang war. Do you remember those? Was it The Substitute? Those Tom Berenger movies?
I don't remember that,
he
but
made a
now that
couple
you
of
say
those.
that, I can picture Samuel Jackson in that role.
And then I think the lesser Belushi did one, like The Substitute 4 was a Belushi flick.
Oh, okay.
Not the good Belushi, not John. It was Jim.
Uh-huh.
So after that, Reynolds kind of bopped around. He made Tristan and Isolde, which was a period romance with James Franco. Made $28 million, but it was privately financed, so we can't really say if that was a success or a failure. No idea how much the budget was.
Weird.
And then his last, I hate when they do that, man. It really fucks me up. I'm trying to make a podcast over here, guys. Not that I think we're going to cover Tristan and Isolde anytime soon, but still waiting on that Balls of Fury figure.
Oh, yeah. I hope he gets back to you, the director of that movie.
Oh, no, it was the star. I don't know why I was going to reach out to the star.
Oh, okay. It's a better story if the star gets back to you. So I approve that.
And he's probably less attached to the movie because, he didn't direct it. So he'd be more likely to
talk some shit. Yeah.
His last movie was Risen, which was a Christian drama in 2016, which doubled its budget. Those Christian movies, man, they make money. I'm always shocked when I look them up. I'm like, oh, this shit made like 3 times its budget. But yeah. And then him and Costner would bury the hatchet and reunite as director and star, aka the Kevins, in 2012 for the miniseries Hatfields and McCoys. man, I assume they're still best friends.
You would think, just like the Hatfields and the McCoys were, if I'm understanding my history.
Want to talk about the box office?
Yeah, let's see if we can wrap up the numbers section.
Again, it's not our usual thing where like this opened in 9th place and made $4 million and everybody hated it. It opened in first. It wasn't even close. It made $21.1 million its opening week. The other new releases that week were The Net, if you remember the Sandra Bullock drama about hackers.
Sure, yeah.
Made by people that had never even looked at a computer, I think.
To be fair, very few of us had.
Yeah, back then, they were hard to come across in your daily life unless you sought them out. And Operation Dumbo Drop. Do you remember Operation Dumbo Drop?
A little bit. That was...
Danny Glover?
But also...
Ray Liotta?
Ray Liotta, yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was him.
They got a little cast in there. Our boy James Hong.
Oh, really? Okay. Love to see him.
Yeah. Love James Hong. And then it only dropped 36% its second week, which usually with movies that everyone hates, we're seeing drops over 50%. So a 36% drop is definitely respectable. Made $13.4 million that week. New releases that week were Something to Talk About, which I think is a romance movie for old people. Babe, classic. And future episode, Virtuosity, the Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington, like an AI construct played by Russell Crowe, who's a murderer.
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
It's a weird movie, man. I used to watch it all the time as a kid, but I only remember a few things about it. I have a feeling it's really bad, but it's going to be colored with nostalgia glasses for me.
Sure.
And it would finally give up first place its third week with $8.6 million, still only a 36% drop. So it was keeping on that steady decreasing.
Yeah.
Surprise hit, Dangerous Minds took the top spot that week. And then probably its real competition came in week 4. Like the first example of real demographic overlap was Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat movie, which I was just itching to see and did not give a shit about Waterworld in 1995 when I was like, I don't know, 7. So that is how it did in theaters. Like, it's not a story where it was a huge failure financially right off the bat. It's just, it was too big to succeed. It's the opposite of too big to fail. They were just so far over budget. There was no way for them to dig themselves out.
It did fine. But yeah, if it could have kept up those really big blockbuster numbers, stayed in first place for 8 weeks or something, it could have been a profitable thing. But it just wasn't that good. It wasn't terrible. It had enough sizzle to get people out and into the theaters somewhat, but then it's just weird enough to get people to go, oh, should I see it? Oh, I don't know. Do you like Kevin Costner? Do you like him being an asshole?
At this point, Robin Hood was a small hit, but Costner wasn't like a big action guy at this stage of his career.
Yeah, it's not an obvious sell.
It still isn't. Like, it never was. Yeah. It never became one. Like, they took a couple swings. And I know one of the reasons he clashed with Reynolds over the Robin Hood production is because Reynolds was giving more and more screen time to Alan Rickman, because Alan Rickman was just having a blast and stole that movie. And now we're talking about this. And what are we talking about? Hopper. And how much fun he is to see, and Enola, and how cute she is, and Jeanne Tripplehorn bringing heart to the movie. And it's like, Costner's the lowest common factor in all these movies.
Yeah.
If they work in spite of him. And if they fail, he's an easy scapegoat.
Yeah, it circles all the way back around to what I was saying at the top. It's like, what did he think he was doing? Did he really want to reinvent himself as this kind of action sci-fi star? Or did he just think he can just try anything once and it'll work? I guess Dances with Wolves taught him he can take a big swing and it'll work. And then all he wanted to do was take big swings, maybe.
That's why I think Dances with Wolves is probably the worst thing to happen to his career, even though it made a bunch of money and won him an Oscar. It won Best Picture, right? It did.
I think so. It was a big deal movie.
And I think he learned all the wrong lessons from that experience.
Yeah.
Which he was just like, oh, if I make a big, long movie that I'm the star of and it's expensive, people will go see it. I've said this to you a couple of times privately, but I don't think this movie's a failure as a movie, but I think it's a failure of execution versus intention. Nobody made the movie they set out to make here. Not Reynolds, not Costner, not Hopper, because there was opposing forces pulling them in different directions every turn. So what we get is this weird mishmash that nobody's really happy with.
I think that's a good description of it. I tried to give this movie a second chance. I'm like, well, what if we just deal with the fact that the characters and the story are not that strong? Like, our hero is not going on a journey that we care about. I'm like, it's like a serious genre movie. It's got genre up in your face the whole time, right? It's this big what if premise. What if the earth is drowned? And yet that part of the movie is built out of these spare parts of other movies. They just pulled stuff out of Road Warrior and they stapled them together without understanding how they could all work. So you don't even get that much. That's why we gravitated to that one scene of the sunken city, because that's the only part where it paid off in a really fun way. And the rest of the time, it just held up cutouts of like, this is what happens in a sci-fi post-apocalypse movie. And it didn't have anything behind it. So it wasn't rewarding as that kind of movie. either. So it's soggy all throughout.
Was that your grand summation?
I think it was. I'm not getting any grander than that tonight.
That was a good one. So that was our Waterworld episode, our 50th episode. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us for 50 episodes.
Thank you.
To 50 more.
Here. Just drink a glass of pee to the next 50.
I'm not drinking pee. That's not it. I teased it. I didn't say what movie we're covering next week, but just in time for Super Bowl Sunday, we're doing the Kevin Costner NFL commercial Draft Day.
Yeah.
This will be exciting. It's a movie I've seen, and I weirdly like in a Raggedy Dog, stupid ass way. Yeah, like
it's got an energy if you can get into that world.
Hell yeah. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Apple Podcast lets you do that. Even Spotify lets you give ratings now.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
If you like the podcast and listen on Spotify, you can throw us a rating on there. 5 stars would be preferable. We'd sure appreciate it.
Throw a few stars in our bucket, please.
You can hit us up on Twitter at BlastZonePod if you have any questions, suggestions, feedback, pretty much anything you want to talk about. Or if you don't like to do it out on the timeline, if you're more of a private person, our email is blastzonepod@gmail.com if you're shy.
Send us something. We'd love to hear from you.
Is there anything else I'm supposed to say at this point? I'm tired. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.